everybody, and welcome to the California Conservative Show, a place on TV where a conservative can actually speak their mind. Hi everybody, and welcome to the California Conservative Show. I'm your host, George Riley, and today we're doing a very special episode of Second Amendment Rights. And with us, we have a very special guest. His name is Sam Paredes. He is the Executive Director for the Gun Owners of California. Sam, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, sir. So can you tell me a little bit about your organization and what it is you guys do?
Sure. Gun Owners of California is the oldest pro-gun political action committee in the country. We were founded by Senator H.L. Richardson, who served for 22 years in the state legislature. When he was a member of the board of directors for the National Rifle Association, he went to the leadership there and asked them if they cared if he started one of these newfangled political action committees in California, because this was the first state that they sponsored a bill to ban handguns in the state. So he went to them, and nobody knew how to run these packs because they were just created by law after the Nixon-Watergate fiasco, and both in Washington and in Sacramento. And Senator Richardson figured it out. So they said sure. And in 1974-75, Gun Owners of California and Gun Owners of America were created. Strictly to do two things: to lobby the legislature and to elect pro-gun candidates nationally through Gun Owners of America, and here in the state with Gun Owners of California. In our first year of operations, we had over 300,000 individual contributions that came in for people wanting to get involved to protect their Second Amendment rights politically. First time it had ever happened. As a matter of fact, from 1975 to 1982, GOP in California stood for Gun Owners Party, because Gun Owners of California actually gave more money to pro-gun Republican candidates than the entire Republican Party did. Of course, the other side figured out that we were kicking them around a little bit too much, so they decided to change the rules and change the way campaigns, committees can be operated, and they passed a law that said that no elected member of the legislature could have more than just two political action committees, their own and one other. Well, the fact is that there was only one man in the country that had more than two political action committees, and that was Senator H.L. Richardson. So they effectively changed the way we fought to protect the Second Amendment here in California. But we've been doing it for a long time. We've adapted to the changes in the rules, and we still kick left-wing anti-gun tail around the state as often as we can.
Very good. And what's your biggest opposition that you have coming to you? What's the biggest anti-Gun Owners of California organization?
As far as organizations are concerned, it's certainly the Brady campaign, formerly known as Handgun Control Incorporated, and they believe that private citizens shouldn't own guns. They will say something different, but if they had their way, they would make sure that nobody owned guns of any kind for any reason. We fight them all the time in Washington, D.C. and here in Sacramento, in city halls throughout the state, before boards of supervisors, and they're the biggest challenge. They've been losing a little bit of ground lately, thanks to the Supreme Court, two separate decisions, and we understand that they're becoming a little bit financially unstable because of the major defeats that they've taken.
So I know that one side that has been saying that when they say that we have a right to bear arms, they are trying to say that we have a right to have a police force. Isn't that the argument, that they're saying that because we have police, that individual citizens don't need guns?
Well, those who don't want to pay any attention to what our founding fathers said about the Second Amendment come up with all kinds of fancy ideas on how to interpret the Second Amendment. It should be only the police, or it should be only the National Guard, or it's an amendment that doesn't have any relevance anymore in this day and age. But the fact of the matter is, the Supreme Court, in a recent decision called Heller versus Washington, D.C., for the first time in history declared that the Second Amendment is an individual right, that when the Bill of Rights, any of the amendments say the right of the people, ... whatever that is, it is referring to an individual right that people have. So the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And then there was a second ruling in McDonald versus Chicago, where they actually incorporated that right to mean that even states and cities and counties could not infringe upon that right. Now, we're arguing over how far that goes right now in courts throughout the country, in legislatures all over the state, the country. Here in California, there are some people that say, well, the Supreme Court didn't really mean that we have a right to keep and bear arms in our. We can see it in our homes, but nowhere else. They didn't say anywhere else. Well, in fact, Justice Scalia points out that he knows that the issue will come back to the Supreme Court to discuss that portion of the amendment that says keep and bear arms. Bearing means carrying, having with you
in your
for
possession,
legal, in your possession for legal purposes. And we're preparing to go back to the Supreme Court and fight that issue. We believe that our founding fathers, through their writings, through the intent, through the arguments that they had, and the history of the right to keep and bear arms, that they meant for all law-abiding citizens in the country to have the right to have firearms, number one, for their own personal protection, number two, for their own livelihood, particularly in that day and age, and number three, so that if they were called upon by the government as a member of the unorganized militia to stand shoulder to shoulder with a member of the standing army, that they would come and stand in line with their own guns and be equally armed as the army. Now, we're not talking about nuclear weapons, and we're not talking about, battleships or anything like that. But as a member of the militia, as one of the soldiers, that if they were called upon, they should be able to come and stand shoulder to shoulder with the army and be equally armed with their own guns. And if they don't have the guns, they said they would be provided by the government. That's what our founding fathers intended with the Second Amendment. There is now no question about it. The Supreme Court has ruled twice. And, of course, the left, if the Supreme Court or if the Lord Almighty were to come down and give an interpretation that went against what they believed, they would figure out some way to argue against it. And that's exactly what they're doing now.
Well, now, law is really specific when they use certain words, and even furthermore than using English, they use Latin words to be able to tell you exactly what it is they're talking about. And it does say a right to bear arms, not a right to possess or to own guns, which would give an argument that says that then you had regulations that you could have on this gun. So do you see in the future, anytime we're in California, where you'd be able to have an open carry policy to be able to just walk around with guns?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, George, because when California was made a state, when we were born a state, a part of the Union, citizens had the right to carry a loaded gun out in the open anywhere they wanted, as long as they didn't commit a crime with it. In 1967, after the Black Panthers started parading around the legislature with loaded AR-15s, the legislature passed a law called the Mulford Act. It was a bill that said that we know that we cannot prevent people from bearing arms because of the Second Amendment, but they have to be unloaded. I don't agree with that position, but that is what they decided. That's been the law of the land since 1967. And now some people are afraid of even that. They are uncomfortable at the mere sight of a firearm. They'll pay $15 or $20 to go to a movie and see guns all over the place, shooting and dismembering people, and no problem at all. But if they were to see somebody walking down the street with a gun, they would have they'd have a conniption. They'd be afraid. They would somehow feel that their rights are being violated by the mere sight of a firearm. So that's a fight that's raging right now in California and literally throughout the country, and we'll continue to fight that fight.
Isn't it a serious deterrent, though, against criminals? I mean, because isn't the argument that if you don't give citizens the right to be able to bear arms, that the only people who will have guns are people who go through a black market and have them illegally?
George, you're absolutely correct. Criminals, by definition, do not obey any of the laws that exist on the books. They're criminals. Obeying the law is not what they do.
And they definitely don't want a good registered gun that says, hey, I'm telling you I have this gun.
It's funny you say that, because the Supreme Court ruled that you cannot force a criminal to register their gun, because you would be making them violate their Fifth Amendment right of self-incrimination. So, you know, registration rules, they only apply to law-abiding citizens, and that's what the fallacy. We believe that the Second Amendment is our concealed weapons permit. We call it constitutional carry. We believe that it is our background check. We believe that this country was founded on innocent until proven guilty, and it's really through these gun laws where that is all flip-flopped over, where we have to prove to somebody, to law enforcement or the government, that we are law-abiding citizens in order to exercise a right. And the mere fact that we have to prove that before we exercise a right calls into question as to whether it's a right at all. You know, if you have to get a permit to exercise a right, it's not a right, it's a privilege. Somebody's granting you the ability to exercise that privilege. So we've got issues that are raging. We have now more states that are becoming constitutional carry. We have Vermont, Alaska, Arizona, Wyoming, that are all constitutional carry. In other words, you don't need a permit to carry a concealed weapon. If you are a law-abiding citizen, you can carry a firearm concealed on your person, and you will not be in violation of any laws unless you commit a crime. If you're a criminal and have a concealed weapon on your person, you are in deep yogurt. You're going to get charged with all manner of felonies for doing something like that. And more states are considering this constitutional carry, that the Second Amendment is our permit, and that no other permit is necessary for law-abiding citizens.
Well, it just makes sense, though, that if you're carrying a gun illegally, that's intent, right? I'm like, why do I have a gun that I'm going to try and be able to get rid of and not be able to trace to me if I'm not planning on doing something with it, right?
George, you're making way too much sense here. You know.
Okay, well,
you're absolutely correct.
My problem is that if there was a rape incident, right, they would swab the woman and they would check for DNA, and they would say, okay, a person's DNA is identifiable to that person. If I went and I committed a murder, they would look for not only my DNA but my fingerprints and say every fingerprint is unique, right? And then they would identify it to me. Now, if I was going to shoot a gun, first I have to register the gun, right? And then the way that it works is every rifling in each barrel is different, right? It's
correct.
Unique to itself. So when I fire a bullet through the rifling, they register the rifle marks on the bullet and they identify that to me. So wouldn't it make sense then that, I mean, if we had guns, anybody should be able to have them as long as you identify that gun to yourself? Why are people not understanding that?
Because the issue is so emotional that common sense and logic often have very little to do with the exercise of the Second Amendment. Not so much the exercise, but the way it is permitted or implemented by government is the proper way to say it. You know, our law enforcement officers do a very good job. Gumshoe on the bricks, I like to call it. Their investigative capabilities in solving crimes are really good. And you'll notice that in most of these marquee cases, crime cases, they find out a lot of history about the firearms that are used and when they got them and where they got them, where they came from, and all of these things. So they have the capabilities of doing that. Unfortunately, all of these rules, these issues that they try to implement or force upon law-abiding citizens in order to ostensibly make law enforcement work easier, are at the expense of the rights of law-abiding citizens. You know, government doesn't have the right to infringe upon our time, our rights, our freedoms. Government doesn't have that right. And that's why we fight so vociferously that we are a nation of laws and rights. Our founding documents enumerated rights that existed according to our founding fathers before the Constitution was written. before the Declaration of Independence, on which the Constitution is based, was in existence. And so we have to fight very hard to maintain that, because those are immutable truths that make the United States of America a shining beacon in the world. In our worst case, in our worst situation, with the worst government that we can conjure up based on our philosophy, we are still the best and freest country in the nation. And we have to fight hard to not allow ourselves to be deluded like everybody else. So that's why we fight so hard against even these goofy laws for putting serial numbers on bullets and putting tagging chemicals in gunpowders and all of these goofy technologies that are developed in order to help law enforcement, but at what expense? At the expense of the rights of law-abiding citizens, and we won't stand for that.
Well, thank you, Sam. We're going to take a real quick break, and we'll be back after a word from our sponsors.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ted Costa, the CEO of People's Advocate, Inc. It's a 501c4 nonprofit corporation, founded by Paul Gann in 1974. Since 1974, we've placed 13 statewide initiatives on the ballot, and the people, in their wisdom, have passed 10 of them into law in the state of California. We're located at Arden Way and Watt Avenue, 3407, and Ted Costa at tedcosta.com is the best way to get in touch with us. We appreciate it if people just drop by and see us at the office. We have other initiatives planned, and we like to call ourselves your voice in government. So come and tell us what your voice is so that we could help you in your quest for good government in the state of California. Thank you.
Welcome back to our show. We're here with a very special guest, Mr. Sam Paredes. He's the Executive Director for the Gun Owners of California. So we're going to talk about federal and international laws pertaining to the guns. Can you tell me a little bit about, has the UN or any of those agencies been trying to restrict our guns in our country?
George, they absolutely have. Over the past couple of years, the United Nations Small Arms Treaty has been making its way through the labyrinth of procedures in the United Nations, and there's an effort really to, under the guise of controlling small arms trade that are going to terrorist groups and revolutionary groups and criminal groups, they're trying to control the commerce and trade in firearms to a lot of different countries. And they've come up with this massive plan that will unfortunately, if implemented, would affect our sovereignty. And we have great concern over that. The U.S. Small Arms Treaty would basically, in many ways, nullify the Second Amendment in the United States. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has been moving the issue forward in support. I don't know what she has signed or not signed, but the Obama administration has been in support of the UN Small Arms Treaty. The good news is that if this treaty does get ratified by the entire UN and becomes a part of their, I don't know what to call it, international law or whatever the rules are that come out of the United Nations, it would have to be ratified by the United States Senate. And praise the good Lord that we have enough people in the Senate, both Republicans and Democrats, who would fight tooth and nail to prevent any outside international agency to affect our constitutional rights and one of our Bill of Rights, especially one of our first 10 amendments. And I don't think that would ever happen. That won't prevent the Obama administration from implementing a lot of things through executive order and as he has said, trying to get gun control by the back door. First, praise the good Lord that the United Nations is one of the entities that moves even slower than Congress. It takes them a long time to do something. And this issue will continue to be out there for quite some time. And we are watching it, but we are not we're not fretting that that is more than a potential danger for the United States.
Well, first of all, how could our country even let international law really have any kind of saying about what we do in our country? I mean, I understand when we're dealing with like international waters and we have some kind of a riparian issue where we go, I have water rights in around the United States that goes to a certain level, and then it starts to infringe on other countries, and then they have international water where you go, this is anybody's water, it could be whatever, right? I'm like, so I see the borders, right? I'm like, there's border issues, and you say, okay, well, I'm going to make these agreements, right? But if we're not dealing with those kind of areas, how are they going to tell us how we're going to run our country? Third world nations and Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein don't need to be telling America how to run its country. How does that happen?
Oh, well, the United Nations is a body, an international body that was established in order to do just that in many ways, to figure out ways, founded and promoted, supported by people who believe in this one world government sort of a deal, one where all nations really do owe their existence to the whole world. And many Americans do not believe that at all. We, I believe, rightfully believe that the United States of America is a special country. We were established by a special group of people, groups of people, multiple people of different races and different creeds who came together to create an experiment in freedom and to implement it and to live here without a king, with a government based on the people themselves. And I feel pretty confident that the vast majority of Americans do not think that the UN has any sort of credibility as far as governing over the United States, and we will fight that. But there are people, even in our own country, who are these one-worlders who think that you know, we are the world and we should all do the same thing the same way, and you know, given the way they believe, you know, with pure democracy in many cases, we would be back in French Revolutionary days, where a vote of 50% plus one could vote that an entire class of people could be guillotined, put to death, democratically.
Well, I just have one question, sir.
Yes.
Is your organization prepared to email and fax, because I definitely want to receipt, a Declaration of Independence to the other countries that did not get this memo?
Well, you know what? Our founding fathers did a pretty good job of sending the Declaration of Independence and stating our intent to the whole world when they wrote it in the first place, and they sent it to King George III, and it was a document that was read around the world.
Well, somebody obviously didn't get it if they're going to try and sit there and say that we owe anybody anything. Doesn't America like flip the bill to take care of so many countries? It's ridiculous.
Oh, yes.
We're like the big brother for a reason, right?
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, I just heard a statistic earlier that the United States funds 70% of NATO, that's the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is the cooperative military body established to preserve peace in Europe. Mm-hmm. Of course, with the United Nations, there's no secret that we are probably way more than 50% of the financial resources for the United Nations, and that kind of doesn't make sense because they so often get together to figure out ways how to treat us badly, to insult us, to denigrate us, and yet we are footing the bill for that, and it is unfortunate, but.
Well, not just money. I mean, 75% of our soldiers are over there doing that. I'm like, they're not sending 75%. They're sending a couple soldiers when they reluctantly have to.
That's true, and I think that's why we have to be very diligent at watching what they do and how they implement what they do. That's why it's important to be involved in presidential elections and in congressional elections. The people who influence our participation in these organizations. We have to be mindful of that. It is important who the president is. It is important who the U.S. senators are and who our congressmen are. If you were to use the Second Amendment as a gauge the philosophical position of a president or a congressman or a United States senator, and they were pro-Second Amendment as our founding fathers established it or enumerated it. I would say that the chances are 99.99% that you would have somebody who would fight for our rights, fight to protect our sovereignty as a country, as individual citizens of the United States, and our right to keep and bear arms, pretty much across the board. Most people would like them a lot. And so, you know, whether we like it or not, we have to play in this giant, you know, swimming pool called the world and in the United Nations. But doesn't mean we have to go along with everything they say, and we have to fight. We have to stand up and stand strong.
Okay, now what about the treason in the White House? I want to talk about the federal law part now. How is President Osama trying to make it so that we lose our guns in America? What is he doing?
President Obama, it's easy to flip-flop there, but President Obama knows full well and admitted that there's very little gun control that he can force to get passed through the Congress, largely because of the massive conservative Tea Party, if you will, victories that we achieved in the Congress last year, and the gains that we picked up in the Senate, with 6 seats in the Senate and 64 seats in the Congress. He knows that he couldn't pass an anti-gun Mother's Day resolution and get it to his desk right now. So he's got to do it through executive order and through the administration of by his agencies. One of his big agencies right now is in deep hot water, and that's the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. They were engaged, I believe, with the full knowledge of the administration and the Attorney General's office in an activity called Operation Fast and Furious, also known as Project Gun Runner or Gun Walker, where law-abiding gun dealers throughout the southern border would call the ATF, as they're supposed to do, and say, hey, listen, somebody's trying to buy a gun. I don't feel good about it. I'll bet you they're a straw purchaser, maybe for a drug cartel or some sort of a criminal. And the ATF has been telling these dealers, go ahead and sell it to them. We're going to watch the guns and follow them to their destinations, and we're going to arrest these people. Well, we've heard all of the press announcements about how many guns come from the United States that go to Mexico and are used by the drug cartels. Well, a huge chunk of them, if not the majority of them, have gone in a program that was administered by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Oh, they forgot to mention it to the Mexican government that they were conducting this program, and ultimately some of those guns that they lost track of were used to kill American law enforcement officers, and that's a massive tragedy.
And that's a fact. They have evidence about that?
Yes, they do.
Is there an investigation?
There is a huge investigation going on in Congress right now. Of course, Congress is protesting that the Obama administration is stonewalling. They are, when asked to provide documents,
like a birth certificate? Sorry.
Documents about the program itself. Sometimes they have provided sheets that have been redacted so much, the information has been redacted so much that they're black sheets of paper with no information discernible on them. But no one wants to admit that they screwed up massively. They did take all of the people that were in charge of the program down in the Arizona field office and scattered them all over the United States, sending them to offices in Florida and other states.
Why not prison?
You would think that that's where it should go. And I think that ultimately, because of patriotic law enforcement officers who work for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives came forward and said, this is absolutely wrong. We should not be doing this. This is insane to do a program like this. We cannot keep track of these guns. They came forward and blew the whistle. And we think that when the investigation, we hope that when the investigation is completed, that there will be people who go to jail, go to prison for this program that broke all kinds of international laws and federal laws, and even local laws, as far as we're concerned.
Well, treason during wartime is punishable by death.
That is true. That is true. I don't know if that applies to the drug war with the cartels in Mexico, but if it does, you're right.
Well, there was people that died on our side that shouldn't have died, and I think that that's kind of outrageous.
It is, and the Mexican government is upset because they know that there are people who have died on their side that should not have died because of this program that went haywire for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives.
So we have a lot of correlation between working with the Mexican government and working with the American government. Can you tell me a little bit more about where those lines are and what areas we have that we have to work together?
Well,
I mean, of course, protecting the borders and everything, but I mean, like, you have what?
Mexico is a sovereign government. They decide who gets to run law enforcement operations on their sovereign ground. And the Mexican government is rightfully upset that the American government allowed these guns to come down south of the border, and then they were running investigation operations to try to keep track of them, which they lost track of.
How does it get across the border?
Well, they would allow the sales to questionable people in the United States, and then they smuggled them across the border. That's the only thing. The ATF is not telling us if they know how they got across. We have to guess, because we know that they were legally sold in the United States by dealers who followed the law. They went into this BATF program, Fast and Furious, and somehow they lost track of them, and they ended up in Mexico.
And is that a cooperative with Border Patrol then?
No, actually, the officer that was killed was a Border Patrol officer. I don't believe that it was. I've seen nothing that showed that there was any sort of cooperation between the Border Patrol and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. So the Mexican government is rightfully upset. I understand that they asked the American ambassador to leave because they were infuriated that somebody didn't tell them that this was going on. And still, the news reports by the mainstream media come out that, you know, all of these American guns in Mexico used by the drug trade have American origins. The vast majority of them come from countries south of Mexico, where they're purchased from rogue military entities and terrorist groups. And those few that have come, many of them came from a failed American law enforcement program under the Obama administration's watch, and they should be held accountable.
Well, thank you very much, Sam. We're going to take another quick break, and we'll be back in just a minute after another word from our sponsors. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pam Pinkston. I'm co-founder of Tea Party Activists. Are you tired of what's going on in your state? Are you fed up with it? Are you still waiting for somebody to come and save us? Well, that somebody is you. And I'm asking you, please come and get involved with our Tea Party. Help us recruit other conservative constitutional candidates and really make a difference in our state. We'll train you. We'll give you all the tools you need to win your campaigns. We need you. Step up. Contact me at, look at the bottom of your screen, pampink@pacbell.net. I'm looking forward to meeting the next senator or assemblyman who's going to change the legislature all around to where we really want it. Thank you.
Hello, I'm George Runner, and I'm a member of the California Board of Equalization. California is very unique. It's the only state that has an elected tax board. That elected tax board can protect you from an overzealous taxing government. We want to be your taxpayer advocate. If you've got questions about your tax obligations, about something that you have a question about California tax policy, we encourage you to call us at the number that you'll see at the bottom of this screen. And also, if you're interested in finding out more about our views on tax policy, about regulatory policies here in the state of California, we encourage you to go to georgerunner.com. There you can see our commentaries when it comes to protecting you against the tax policies that oftentimes make it very hard for Californians to be successful. California has the 6th highest tax rate in the state, in the nation. We need to do better than that. We need to grow businesses, not overtax businesses. Thank you for being a part of the California economy and being a part of California.
We're here with our very special guest, Mr. Sam Paredes, Executive Director for the Gun Owners of California. Sam, let's talk about California real quick. So right now we have people who are trying to take our guns away from us. Can you tell me what our immediate threats are here in California right now?
Sure, George. There's every year we fight a whole slug full of anti-gun laws in the legislature. This year they got mad because we defeated every one of them in the last legislative session, so they came back with a vengeance. We have one bill that will change the definition of handgun ammunition. They said that they were afraid that someday the pro-gun community would sue in order to have armor-piercing ammunition legalized for personal possession and use. So they sponsored SB 124 that changes the definition and restates that armor-piercing ammunition is illegal for us to own and possess. Fact of the matter is that armor-piercing ammunition, handgun ammunition, is banned under federal law, so this bill will have zero impact whatsoever. It was all show. It was all for show. It was all for fear. But they are accomplishing their effort to change the definition of handgun ammunition to include many cartridges that you and I would consider rifle ammunition. By removing and changing a couple of words in the state definition, they will include cartridges like 30-06 and 223 and 35 Remington and 30-30 Winchester and 7x30 Waters and 22-250 and many cartridges that we consider to be rifle.
Yeah, that's definitely small rifles.
Yeah, well, they would be considered under the definition of handgun ammunition because they were chambered in the Thompson Contender once upon a time ago. And the Thompson Contender is a unique single-shot handgun that was chambered for over 200 different calibers, many of them rifle calibers for hunting and competition use. And because that was done, they would now be considered handgun ammunition. But the real purpose is so that under another bill, SB 427, they can require all of us, law-abiding citizens, every time that we buy a box of California-defined handgun ammunition, they would require us to give our name, our driver's license, our address, our phone number, the name of the salesman who sold us the ammunition, the brand of ammunition we bought, how much ammunition we bought, and then ultimately they want to treat us like registered sex offenders, and we have to give our thumbprint every time we buy a box of California-defined handgun ammunition.
So next stop, they're going to try and make us turn in our cartridges and be like, if you're missing a shell, where did that shell go?
You know what? That is a
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to give ideas.
No, that is a logical progression, and they have people that are thinking these things and coming up with these things, and yeah, don't give them any more ideas. But those efforts are completely misguided. And let me explain why. Senator De Leon says that he doesn't want gang bangers to go to Walmart to buy their handgun ammunition or to Big Five, so he wants to be able to check or have law enforcement after they purchase the ammunition to be able to check these logs to see if anybody who purchased ammunition was illegal for them to purchase them. And again, the fact of the matter is it really only affects us as law-abiding citizens, because these gang members could just as easily jump in a car, drive to Nevada, to Las Vegas or to Reno, go into one of the major sporting goods stores, buy all the handgun ammunition they want, trunk loads, truck full, an 18-wheeler full if they wanted to, drive back into the state of California, and as long as they're not selling it to somebody else, they're giving it to all their buddies, and they know that their buddies aren't a felon, they haven't broken a single law.
So De Leon wants gangbangers to make their own ammunition. Is that
well? That's another you know. These guys are creative, and you know, I can see a situation to where you know, a criminal group would assign one guy. It's your job to learn how to reload ammunition, so we get around all these laws, and you know, we're going to spend $300 and buy a loader, and the components we're going to get, and your job is going to be to make ammunition for our criminal operations. That's completely possible, but in all of this, the people that are really affected are law-abiding citizens. Here in the city of Sacramento, the one example that they continue to show as proof that this kind of a program works to find criminals who illegally buy ammunition, they've come up with a couple hundred hits on through this program. But when you take into account that there were tens of thousands of records and sales that were conducted, and only a couple hundred hits, it seems to me to be a massive waste of resources when you're talking about below a percentage point of effectiveness as a crime-fighting tool. You know, it would be easier for them to go and knock on the doors of anybody who they know is a known felon, because they've got the lists. Mm-hmm. Knock on the door and say, "Hey, you have any guns or ammunition?" And then see how they react, and go get them. That's not going to happen. But it just kind of points out how ludicrous it is that law-abiding citizens have to be so mistreated. And then they say, "What's the big deal? You're giving your thumbprint, and you're signing your name, and you're giving your address and all that stuff. It's a big deal. That's part of my liberty. It's part of my identity, and I shouldn't be forced by the use of government power to give that up, so that you can run some sort of a program. Well, I shouldn't be forced to do that.
Like the ATF ran a program.
That's right. That's exactly right. Again, you know, the people that are impacted by these, the people whose rights are those that are being abridged, are law-abiding citizens, and
because of course criminals are there to break the law, so there's no way that they would, of course.
By definition, that's correct. Mm-hmm. And you know what? The tighter you make this noose, and the more it affects law-abiding citizens, the more criminals squeeze out and go out and figure out a different way to do it.
Because it stimulates a black market.
You're absolutely correct.
I mean, that's
you know,
just economics.
What makes you think, if they are importing literally tons of illegal drugs and products into the state of California, what makes you think that they're not going to also be able to sneak in a case or two or 10 or 100 cases of ammunition if they wanted to get around the laws? Sure, they're going to do that. That's what's going to happen. And now that we aren't going to be sending all of the criminals to jail or prison that should be going to jail, it's kind of like a free license. If I do it and I get caught, I'm going to get my hand slapped, and I'll get thrown back out into the general population, and I'll do it again, because the hand slap doesn't hurt very much. So we've got those bills. We've got a bill by Assemblyman Mike Fuhrer of West Los Angeles, who wants to register and keep the registration information on rifles and shotgun sales. Right now, the state of California does maintain the registration information on handguns purchases. I think that's unconstitutional, but that is the law that we have here. They want to expand that to include the maintenance of rifle and shotgun ammunition. And you know what? The only real reason to maintain a registration list is to ultimately know where they are when you want to come get them. Because registration doesn't solve any crimes. It doesn't prevent any crimes. And those that can be conjured up as, you know, yeah, you see, we caught this criminal because of registration. You're talking about numbers that are so infinitesimally small. When you're thinking and talking about probably 40 or 50 million guns that are owned by law-abiding citizens in the state of California. 400 million guns owned by law-abiding citizens in the country, the vast majority of them never used in the commission of a crime. But they want to know where all 400 million of them are, or all 40 million of them are, because they want control.
Well, if I want to kill somebody, I'm going to kill somebody, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. I think poison's probably a way more effective and efficient way of doing it. But realistically, isn't the argument a gun never killed anybody?
You know, you're absolutely right. It took a person with evil intent in their heart and mind to murder somebody. It took the act of a person who used an implement or their bare hands, whether it was an automobile, whether it was poison, whether it was a gun, whether it was a knife, whether it was a rope, whether it was their fists. It was the person that did it. And you know, they don't register fists and feet and shoes and gloves and stuff like that. Because that isn't changing the heart and the mind of people. So you know, the benefits of firearms ownership far outweigh anything that the anti-gunners can come up with as to why we shouldn't have them. So we're fighting it here in the state. We've got other bills. I mean, they want us to paint all of our BB guns and pellet rifles and pellet pistols bright colors, so that when a law enforcement officer rolls up on kids playing, they will understand that these are not firearms, they're toys. Well, there's a big problem with that. BB guns and pellet guns are not toys. As a matter of fact, many of them are legal for use in hunting, in taking wild animals, which means they have deadly potential.
They fly just as fast. A lot of the BB guns fly just as fast as a regular rifle.
That's correct.
AR-15s, was at 22 feet per second. That's the same as a lot of the Daisy rifles.
Right.
I don't see the difference.
That's absolutely correct. And they have, they are dangerous. And if they are successful in passing this law that requires the industry to paint all airsoft guns and BBs and pellet firearms into bright colors, here's the interesting point. They exempted the paintball guns, even though paintball guns look very realistic these days, but they exempted them for political purposes. But if they're successful, law enforcement will now train its officers. Hey, if you roll up on a scene and you see somebody walking around with a brightly colored gun, don't worry, it's a BB gun or a pellet gun or an airsoft gun or you know, something like that.
Sorry.
Think that, I mean, criminals are going to take about a nanosecond to say, hey, if I spray paint my gun to a brightly colored gun and I come into an encounter with a law enforcement officer, I now have the drop on them, because they're going to be trained to think that I have a toy gun. And when I point this gun at them, it's going to be a real gun and they're going to get a big shock. Fact of the matter is, the law enforcement officers could be killed because of this kind of a bill. It is so dangerous. But Senator De Leon, who's carrying this bill, is he has a passion for anything anti-gun, and he tries to wrap himself around the cloak of law enforcement and protection of law enforcement officers, when in fact he is only supported by the most left-wing anti-gun chief law enforcement officers in the state, the sheriff of Los Angeles County, the chief of Los Angeles County, whoever that person is at the time. They're always anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment people, or they wouldn't be there. The city councils and the appointing authorities are not going to appoint a chief of police in Los Angeles. And unfortunately, who is an anti-gun, and unfortunately, the vast majority of the population lives in LA County or the greater Bay Area or Orange County or San Diego County, where we have anti-gun law enforcement officers. And it's a fight. It's a constant fight that we have in the legislature. There's another bill where they, you know, every time we do buy a gun, we have a background check. We pay for our own background checks. Mm-hmm. You know, they run it against NICS and they run it against the state records to make sure that we are not a felon, and they make us wait 10 days and then we can pick up our gun. Well, the Attorney General, her budget was cut by the governor, and she wants to expand a law enforcement program where they're going after felons who use guns. So what they want to do is they want to dip into this fund that is created and supposedly supporting our background checks. They want to dip into it to fund this other law enforcement program that is not legal under existing law. That's why they have to sponsor another bill. Unfortunately, that means that you and I, as law-abiding citizens, are taxed and foot the whole bill to support this kind of a law enforcement program. I don't have any problem with the target of the program, what they're trying to do. What I do have a problem with is sticking us with the whole bill when this is something that affects all law-abiding citizens and should be a general tax out of the general fund, not one of a special fund, because as soon as they wipe out the surplus that exists, which is not supposed to exist according to law, the law says that if there's a surplus, you're supposed to reduce the cost of that fee in order to maintain it at
equilibrium.
That's
yes,
correct.
Absolutely.
Of course, at the beginning of this year, they had an $18 million surplus. So they look at that as, oh boy, here's a pot of money for us to be able to spend on something like that. As soon as they wipe out the surplus, as they expand their role of government, which government always does, it always expands, they're going to raise the cost for law-abiding gun owners who purchase firearms. They're going to raise the fees on them, and they're going to continue to have to pay more and more until it becomes so expensive that we can't afford to buy guns in California.
Well, Sam, you know, you have a lot of great insight about how we can protect our own rights. And real quick, can you give the viewing audience contact information or a way that they can join your organization and get a hold of you?
Sure. Gun Owners of California, our offices are in Folsom. You can reach us at www.gunownersca.com. That's GUNOWNERSCA. Or our phone number is 916-984-1400. Call us, email us anytime you like. Find out what's going on. We would appreciate the support of anybody who believes that something has to be done lobbying-wise and in the elections to elect people who defend and believe in our Constitution. And we invite you to join us and to support us and keep up to speed on what's going on. So give us a call.
Well, everybody, this has been a very exciting show of the California Conservative Show, a special Second Amendment episode, and we appreciate you guys watching. Thank you.
Throughout our country's history, we fought to conquer tyranny. Our fathers never failed to pay the price. So children have the right to pray, to go to school, to laugh and play. When the line is drawn, we can't walk away. We're a country built on love and peace. The call to war was never made with ease. We don't go out looking for a fight, but we gotta stop and take a stand when terror threatens our homeland, so our children won't have to live in fear. There's dads and moms who've lost their lives fighting, so we'll keep the right to live in peace and harmony. Sometimes it takes much more than talk to face them down and walk the walk. When the line is drawn, we can't walk away. Our country offers everything in life that's nice, but just like all good things in life, we pay a price. There's dads and moms who've lost their lives fighting, so we'll keep the right to live in peace and harmony. Sometimes it takes much more than talk to face them down and walk the walk. When the line is drawn, we can't walk away. Yeah, when the line is drawn, we can't just walk away. won't just walk away.